All right, it's 7 o'clock. If y'all will come on in and let's get our seats. All right, tonight we have Mr. JJ, number 1, and Mr. Peyton, number 2, and then Josh Hicks is going to lead our invitation song for us. So come on up, JJ. Get it no further down. Anybody know anything about this dude, Icky? All right, well, hey.
What?
Just look. All right, what you gonna sing? Tell them real loud. Okay?
I'm going to sing Jesus loves the little children.
All right. Ready?
Ready?
Jesus
loves the little children. Hold the children.
Black and white, they're precious in His sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. Jesus died for all the children, all the children of the world.
Little children of the world.
Right there. All right, let's sing Jesus Loves Me. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to Him belong, they are weak, but He is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so.
So there are times in our life that we may look back at our circumstances or look at our current circumstances, and we might wonder, where's God? We may call out to Him, we may pray to Him, asking Him to take away the pain, to take away the struggle, to calm the storm that we may be in, to close the lion's mouth before we even set foot in the lion's den. But if we take a closer look at Scripture, we'll find something that's consistent, but it's also beautiful at the same time. God doesn't always remove His people from the struggle, but He always meets them in it. In Daniel chapter 6, Daniel wasn't kept out of the lion's den. God didn't stop him from being thrown in, but He shut the mouths of the lions while Daniel was in there with them. Just 3 chapters back in Daniel chapter 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they weren't kept from the fiery furnace. But as they stood in those flames, there was a fourth walking among them. They walked out of that furnace that was set 7 times hotter than normal, without a burn or even smelling like smoke. You see, God's greatest act isn't always the removal of hardships. It's His undeniable presence within our hardships. It's how near He is to us, His presence. It's His peace that passes understanding. It's His power that sustains when nothing else can. Even Jesus, the Son of God, he didn't escape every storm. He felt exhaustion. He faced rejection. And he experienced pain. Yet in the middle of that storm on the sea found in Matthew chapter 8, he slept. Not because there wasn't a storm going on around him, but it's because he knew who held him. He knew that the storm wasn't stronger than the one who created those winds and waves. So here's the encouragement for us today. Just because Jesus is with us doesn't mean the storm won't come. But what that does mean is that the storm won't sink us. We might be standing in the fire. We might feel like we are surrounded by lions. We might feel as if our boat is rocking from those winds and waves that we didn't see coming. But the same hand that held Daniel, that stood in the fire with those 3 Hebrew boys, that calmed the storm around Jesus and his disciples, it's the same hand that holds you and me today. Amen. We're not left alone. We are not abandoned. We're not forgotten. God is not far away. He's closer than you think, stronger than we can imagine, and faithful, more than we can understand. The storms of life, they may rage around us, but like Jesus in the boat, we too can rest, knowing the one who commands peace is with us. And so tonight, if you have any need, there are people here that love you that will help you with those storms of life. If there's any way that we could pray for you or help you, please come forward now as we stand and as we sing together.
It is a pleasure to see each of you here tonight at the East Walker Church of Christ. If you would, we have a few that we need to, keep in our prayers. First of all is Maury. He is doing better, still recovering. Virginia, if I'm remembering correctly, she didn't have the flu, but she was still sick. So recovering from that, but be praying for both of them. Also continue to pray for Leah and Austin. Things are going well, but they would still appreciate and need the prayers from us. We also need to keep Leanne in our prayers. Is going tomorrow for a procedure, morning or evening? Morning, okay. So if you would, be mindful of her, doctors, and all of those that are going to be part of that procedure. Do we have any others that we need to add to our list or updates that are on? One second. Sandra, we need to remember her. She's been sick for the last few days. Also, I've forgotten the last name. Shelby Cochran, is that correct? Barry, that last name? Is having some intestinal issues, so keep those in your prayers. I'll figure out the name for sure on that. Is there anyone else we need to add or updates to those who are on it? All right, by way of announcements, there's still some sign-up lists in the foyer, so take a look at those. Also, Michael Jones is still collecting money for Thanksgiving and Christmas meals. Also, I would like to thank all of you for Monday night, all of the attendance that we had, all of those that brought food and meals. It was a very great time, and I think we haven't counted them all yet, but it seems like this one is our biggest one of I guess my tenure here. So I appreciate all of you and the effort y'all put in with that. Also, remember Bible Bowl practice or Bible Bowl practice November 16th. Then tomorrow night will be Teens for Truth. So youth, keep that in mind. Is there anything else that we need to make mention of before we have our prayer and dismiss tonight? Or if you will, let's bow our heads. Our dear loving and righteous and almighty Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time and this place that we can gather together and worship you and praise you. We ask you to please be with those that we have mentioned, those of our number that are recovering from sickness, those that are going to be undergoing procedures, that you would comfort them and be with them as only you know how to be. We ask you to please be with each of us as we go to our classes. Help us to keep a humble heart and an open mind. Please help us to seek out your word and your will for our life. We thank you so much for Jesus. We thank you so much for the hope of salvation and the forgiveness of sins that we have through him. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. Classes can take their places now. I think it just fell down when he... Oh no. Fixed it. Somebody looks a little sleepy tonight. Oh, okay. Well, then that's a better reason to sleep with Dad, right? All right, we are continuing our study looking at the book of Judges. We, I guess, essentially covered the first 2 chapters last week, maybe a little bit of chapter 2 that we're going to dig into again. For those of you that are taking... this is the old one I sent. You think you can run get Alan and ask him to switch out the projectors for me or the PowerPoints for me? Well, it's all relative anyway. No, oh, never mind, Tamilla's up there. It should be under the elder's email address. All right, well, we're starting there anyway. So Judges 2, end of the chapter. Now, like we said, Judges 1 and 2 kind of covers a real broad overview of all of the conquest that's happened in the book of Judges. It is this big brushstrokes, big picture image of the people went in, they conquered, they accomplished what God said they would do, but they didn't do it completely, right? There were these certain groups, certain sections, certain peoples that they just said, you can stay, we're not going to run you out, or maybe they decided just to leave them to make them forced labor. The reasonings are different in some of them. But I want to start with chapter 2, verse 16, because this verse through the end of chapter 2 is the big picture review or the big summary of what's going on here. All right, again, Judges 2, starting with verse 16, he said, "Then the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hand of those who plundered them. Yet they did not listen to their judges, for they whored after other gods and bowed down to them, and they soon turned aside from the way which is in which their fathers had walked, who had obeyed the commandments of the Lord. They did not so." And then it kind of goes down, more detailed on, they went after these other gods, they would go into captivity or oppression, they'd cry out, then the judge would come. And like we said, this is the cycle that we're going to see throughout, really throughout all of God's people's history. But here it's this, they've taken the land, they haven't taken it completely. Now these judges raise up to help them drive out some of these problems that they hadn't focused on. Now, notice the middle of verse number 20 in Judges 2. It says, "Because this people have transgressed my covenant that I commanded their fathers, and they have not obeyed my voice, I will no longer drive out before them any of the nations that Joshua left when he died." So here's the thought. Yes, there was some work to be done after Joshua had died, but they were still being driven out. That's the image that's painted there. But they chose not to do it. They chose to give in to it or give themselves over to it or give themselves over to the idols of the nation. And God said, "I have had enough." Now, you remember Joshua at the very end of his life, Moses at the very end of his life. What was the statement they made? If you serve God, what will he do? Paraphrase it. He'll bless you. What else? What would be contained in those blessings? He would bless them, and he would drive out, be a source of military strength for them. They would never have to worry about the people of the nations around them, right? That's the image. But God says, all right, I've had enough. I told you what was going to happen. You didn't listen, and now it's happening. It's very similar to a parent with a child, right? Any of you get that rotation or that cycle? I told you, you didn't listen, now here's the punishment. Then there's maybe the reprieve of some, change their behavior for a while, but then maybe it starts to slip again. Human nature is this. Even us today, in our fervor and zeal and love for God, how often do you sometimes miss the mark on things? How often, maybe our focus is misguided. Maybe we let that rage or wrath of something that happens in life just overwhelm us a little bit. But here are these people. Fail and fail and fail and fail. And God said, all right, here's what's going to happen. Now that gets us into chapter 3, which is, here are these nations that you had. And he goes down this reasoning. Let's look at, I think it's verse 2. Yeah, middle of verse 2 it says, "And it was only in order that the generations of the people of Israel might know war." Then skip down to verse 4. "They were for the testing of Israel, to know whether Israel would obey the commandments of the Lord." So the leaving them there, before in the book of Joshua, it wasn't really, the reasons weren't pointed out then. It was more maybe a military thing. They were just going here and there. But here it is, this is why God chose to leave them. Number one, and I think this was probably going to be the case most of the time, right? Don't we always need to be able to test and sharpen our swords and figure out how to fight the fight? He said, part of the reason I'm leaving them there is so that you guys can understand what it means to fight. So you can prepare for war, so that you can have the military strength maybe that you need, or at least the understanding of battle that you need. But then that second part is purely spiritual. He said, I left them there because I wanted to see if you guys really loved me. I wanted to see if you would choose me instead of them. Now again, remember the end of Joshua, the end of Moses, their statement there was, serve God, choose not the God of the Amorites, but choose to serve the God of your fathers, that general statement. So here they are, they haven't done it. So now here's the rewards, the punishment for their failure to keep that covenant relationship with God. All right, skip down if you would now. We go now to verse 7, and we get into the actual judges here. Actually, wait, I want to skip back to verse number 6 and notice something that's said here. This kind of, I think, gives the general, here's what these people did in order to fall away from God. It says, and they took their daughters, and their daughters they took to themselves for wives, and their own daughters they gave to their sons, and they served other gods. This is talking about the other people, those other nations. Go back up the last few verses, those that it mentions there. Since they were left, God said, I left them there to test you. And you took their daughters as wives for your sons, and you gave your daughters to their sons for your wives. Now, what happens when there's that kind of exchange, when families marry into one another? Culture shift, right? There's this meshing of different traditions. Anybody have, maybe you swap back and forth between Thanksgiving and Christmas, or you go here for 1 year, there for the other, and they're different? The thought is they weren't saying, we're going to be separate. We're not going to be like them. It was, well, you know, they're okay. They're just like, they're people just like us. You know, their daughters are pretty. They're nice. You know, they're not godly people, or they're not Israelites, but that's the mindset, right? And God is saying, because of that, we see this degradation, this slow erosion of Israel and their dedication to God. All right, now that gets us into verse 7. We're shown here the first, or introduced to the first judge here. Verse 7, though, says, and the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Now, again, here's that kind of flag post, or that sign marker that we can see in this cycle. After every judge, or after every man of God dies, there's a period of time, and then they fall directly away. Or it's right after they die, they give in to this. But you notice end of verse 7, it says they served Baals and Ashtaroths, therefore the anger of the Lord was kindled against them. Now, who is Baal and who is Ashtaroth? False gods. These are the gods of the land. Exactly. So they're falling to the exact thing that Joshua said don't do, right? Don't fall to these, don't serve these gods, but here they are. Now, Othniel was mentioned earlier. Notice there in the middle of end of verse 9, it talks about how Othniel, the son of Kenza, Caleb's younger brother, this was the fellow that went up and took the mountain and showed his, answered Caleb's call to go and do that. This was a man that was willing to serve God, is the thought. So he went up there, delivered these things out, or delivered them from the Lord, anger of the Lord was kindled. He sent the Cushraman, the king of Mesopotamia, that's how we'll label him there, sent them down, And essentially for 8 years they were, I guess, in tribute to them. They were just a sub-state of Mesopotamia, or at least in tribute to them. Then they cried out for God. Othniel comes up, and what happens? Notice verse 10. He defeats them. But it says, the Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and he judged Israel. And then he went out to war. So the phrasing there is, here is the problem, here is the issue. Then God calls someone, raises up someone. The phrasing is different there, but the idea is God chooses one and then sends them out to fix the issue, or at least he gives them the mission to fix the issue. So he goes out and does that, beats the king there. Verse number 11, the land had rest for 40 years. Then Othniel, the son of Kenza, died. Now verse 10, what is the very next thought? This judge that judged righteously, that was a faithful warrior for God, he dies, and what's the phrasing? Israel did what? Evil in the sight. We're not going to get away from this cycle anytime soon. So, Othniel, his influence fades away. Verse 12, Israel is doing evil. This time it's Moab and King Eglon. I'll give you a hint here. This is one of my, I guess, one of the most vivid parts of the Old Testament that stand out to me, or at least the description here, because we know this story about how Ehud is going to be a messenger for the king. He's bringing some kind of tribute to Eglon. But notice verse 19, or verse 18, then into 19. It says, when Ehud had finished presenting the tribute, he sent away the people who carried the tribute. Now verse 19, but he himself turned back at the idols near Gilgal. Now, Gilgal was one of these places where God was glorified, right? Uplifted, that it should have been not filled with idols, but filled with remembrance, presence of God. So here is Ehud. He's going up to serve this unrighteous king, or give tribute to this unrighteous king. And it's almost like he walks by this place that should be dedicated to God, right? And he gets fed up with himself. He looks at it and he's just disgusted. And then he goes right back around. But he himself turned back at the idols of Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. Now, I don't know the setup here, if this was, God's direction telling him exactly what to do in this situation, or if God just said, hey, I'll help you take care of him. But the thought is, here is a man who went, offered the tribute, but then recognized, because of this passing by Gilgal, this isn't what I should be doing. This isn't what is needed in God's place or God's promised land for us, right? So he goes up and secretly, essentially assassinates the king. He goes in and says, I've got a secret message for you. Takes a sword, the sword he brought with him, so that kind of indicates maybe this was premeditated, or at least something maybe he thought about, maybe he didn't know he was going to do at the time, but he goes up, stabs the guy in the stomach. The image there is that this king is so obese, so large, that the sword itself disappears, and he just goes out, locks the doors, tells the servants, hey, don't bother him, he's busy. They think he's going to the bathroom, so they wait and wait and wait till they get scared that they've waited so long. And then they go in and see that he's dead. Now, you think about this. Here is essentially a guy who is just offering tribute at the moment. And what is he able to do? He's able to go in and make sure this king is put to death. Now, you notice the next thought that happens there, verse 24. Or, no. Skip down, verse 28. And he said to them, follow after me, for the Lord has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hands. He goes down, gathers this army, or at least calls these people together and says, look, we can do this. We can go and we can fight. We can win. And that's exactly what they do. End of verse 28, went down after him, seized the fords of Jordan against the Moabites. No one was passed over. 10,000 Moabites were killed. Not a man escaped. Now, look at the end of verse 30. It says, the land had a rest for 30 years. So the thought is, here is this problem. 80 years. 80 years. So he comes in. This issue is taking place. And he says, again, that thought, there's an idol where it shouldn't be. So he goes and destroys it all because of that. You think about what starts in our life when we notice the idols that have taken God's place. Has God or has something in the world taken God's place in your life before? That's all of us, right? Ehud is able to recognize it. And he does whatever's needed to cut it out, to cast it out, to do away with it. Now, the end of chapter 4 there, very short, single verse, or at least here is only a single verse. But we have Shamgar mentioned. Now, he kills 600 men with what? Now, what is an ox goad? Mm-hmm. Goading. Essentially, it's a poking stick. It's something that you use just to kind of get the animals to get on where they need to be. 600 of the Philistines with an ox goad, and he saved Israel. Now, I don't know the build up to that. We get a little bit of thought. If you skip over to chapter 5, look at verses 6 through about 9, there seems to be some imagery that's given to Shamgar's problems there. But essentially the thought is they were being oppressed. Shamgar got angry at this. The image to me is, again, he's got an ox goad, so it's not like he's going out to fight, but he goes out and kills 600 of them, right? God is glorified through this act of one man. Now, if you look in chapter 5, verse 6, it kind of talks about how there was bandits and highwaymen, and the thought was it wasn't safe to go around during that time. One verse in the Bible. Is that enough, though, to praise and glorify God with? Would you guys be okay if your name was only in one verse of the Bible? I've often thought of, which chapter is it in? Exactly, especially if it's in a good way. But skip over. Well, chapter 6 is where my mind is going, because it uses and God sent a prophet. We don't have any clue who this prophet is. It was just a prophet of God, and he goes and tells Gideon sets up this thought of Gideon and how he needs to go into battle. But the thought is, I'd be okay if I was just that young prophet. Don't even have my name in there. It's just my story, maybe. But the thought with this is we don't have to have the whole life story of these people to understand the greatness of what's happening here. How many of you think you could kill or defend yourself against 600 men with a real pointy stick? God is setting this up. All right, then we get into chapter 4. Chapter 4 and chapter 5 both deal with Deborah and Barak. Again, two more judges that are mentioned here. But beginning of chapter 4 is this exact same cycle that we've talked about. People of Israel did what was evil in the sight of God. But you notice verse 4, or chapter 4, verse 1, it says, after Ehud died. So it's like he died, and then they just jump right back into it. Now, they're sold into oppression, given into it. This one says for 20 years. Now, I know some people try to work in the numbers and try to make them mean something. Don't try to do that. It's just giving us the time to set up the timeline for this. So, now notice verse 4. Deborah is what, according to verse 4? prophetess. All right? Something else is oil. Well, that's in verse 5, my bad. She would sit at the palm tree between these places or in this valley, and she would judge the people that came to her. Now, we don't have many detailed accounts, I guess, of prophetesses. They're often even looked at, I guess, in a negative way. But the thought here is, who is God using in order to keep his people safe? The ones that are willing, the ones that are able. Here, this woman, she is sitting at a place while the people come to her with their issues and problems. That's the position of a judge. But there's a unique relationship between Deborah and Barak. And that is, they're both judges, but I want to read the account here. Verse number 6, starting there. Deborah is the she. It says, she sent and summoned Barak, the son of Bimnan, from Kadesh Naphtali, and said to him, has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you? Go, gather your men at Mount Tabor, take 10,000 from Naphtali and the people of Zebulun, and I will draw out Sisera. Now, Sisera during this time is the general, I guess you'd say, of the Midianites that they're going to be going after. Or excuse me, not the Midianites. King Jabin of Canaan. He's the general of this, and he has a great army of 900 chariots. And the thought is, Deborah had the authority to send for Barak, right? So that shows that she is in a position to ask people or demand that people come to her for things. But you notice what she says. She doesn't give him the command, but what does she say? You've already been given the command, right? Barak, you were already told to go. So now get up and go. Now, what's his response with this? If you go, I'll go. Now, is there anything wrong with, I guess, needing or wanting others to go with you, to stand next to you, to have others fight the fight? Yes, sir.
There's nothing wrong with that except the fact that he shows a lack of faith. He said, I don't think I can do it on my own with just God.
The point is, he'd already been given the message, right? God had already told Barak, go up and fight. But he chose, I'm only going to do it if you go with me. Again, going to the thought of, if your name was in the Bible, how exciting would that be, or honoring would that be? What if God asked you, hey, could you go do this for me? What would you do? I'm just guessing, or I don't know what you guys are going to do. I know what I would try to do. But it'd be like, great, okay, what do you want me to do, God? When? How quickly? How high do I jump kind of thought? Because, hey, I get to give back to God who's done so much for me, right? But Barak says, I'll go if you go. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with needing strength or needing help, but if God says something, what should we be willing to do? Whatever that thing is, in whatever way that it is presented to us. But he is called to go, so he actually does and goes. Notice real quickly verse number 11. It says, now Heber, the Canaanite, had separated from the Canaanites, the descendants of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and he had pitched his tent far away from the oak, or as far away as the oak in Zemana, which is near Kadesh. Now, the image is, here is this man that was in that lineage of Jethro, right? This is the same individual. Here is that person that is a Canaanite that is with the people of God. They were those sojourners, but now they are part of God's people. But what did this guy do? I'm going to go as far away as I can. I like the image there of he pitched the tent as far away as. For me, that reminds me kind of Lot's position. He saw the green grass, the better view, and so he went that way. Seems like this guy didn't want what the rest of the Canaanites were doing, so he goes over here. If you skip down to verse 17, it talks about how this family, Heber, his family was in good relationship with Sisera, the general of the Canaanite army. But anyway, he does this. Barak goes up to battle with him at Tabor. They essentially win. If you look at the song, it talks about how the rain came, and the image is that the chariots essentially get bogged down or stuck, and the men that go up to fight it, they just overtake them. And then Sisera runs away. Now, I want to back up just a minute and notice something that I think is funny. Look, if you would, at verse 7. Here is, again, that interaction between Deborah and Barak. And here's what she says. She says to him about God, I will draw out Sisera and the general of Jabin's army to meet you at the river Kishron with his chariots and his troop, and I will give them into your hand. Now, what's the message from God? Take the army, go here, and what's going to happen? Get it, go, and you'll win. I would follow that strategy if God gave it to me, right? Do this, this will happen, win. But notice what he says. Barak said, I will go if you go with me. But notice how Deborah responds. I'll surely go with you. You know, that's what we should do, right? If somebody is weak or in doubt, no problem, I'll help you, right? But notice what she says. Because you asked, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead you to glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Now, think about Barak for a moment. Again, a judge. Here is a man that is going out and delivering God's people. But he is directly told, because of your doubt, you're not going to get the glory. You're not going to get the killing blow, so to speak. But it's going to be a woman. Now, that gets us down to verse 17. And this is the intersection of that Heber, the Canaanite, and Sisera, this general. He has lost his chariots. He is running away on foot. He sees this one tent, or I guess gathering, I don't know if it's one, but he sees this tent, runs up to it, was running by it, and this woman, Jael, essentially shouts out to him and says, you know, what's the matter? What do you need? What's going on? Verse number 18. Jael came out to meet Sisera, said to him, turn aside, my lord, do not be afraid. So he turned aside to her into the tent, and then she covered him with a rug. Now, the setup here is she must have known who this was, right? Or at least after that first interaction, she realized, hey, this is the general. He is running. Maybe he told her that. Maybe she, again, they were friendly, so maybe she'd seen him and knew who he was. The thought is she calls him into the tent. She hides him, brings him something to drink. Now, I think it's funny. He asks for water. She brings him milk. And essentially this helps him to do what? Fall into a deep sleep, right? Then she quietly walks over and does what? Here is the woman that takes the glory, right? Not because she is a great warrior, not because she is mighty, but because she was able to take this man that was running from God's vengeance and give him that last nail, right? Was able to put him down like God, through Deborah, said he would be. Now, look, if you would, verse number 22. Barak is pursuing Sisera. Jael comes out of her tent and said, "Come on over here." Now, notice or think about this for a second. Here is Barak. He's been pursuing this guy, trying to kill him, and he sees that woman come out of the tent and said, "Come over. I will show you the man you're seeking." Now, what would you think if that happened? I'll show you the man you're seeking. My mind goes to, hey, he's hiding under the rug, or maybe he's, back with the camels, or maybe he's, put on the servant's clothes. But she brings this judge of God, and here's the rug, here's the tent spike, here's the hammer, and said, "I've taken care of it for you." Do you think Barak had those words of Deborah echo in his head at this moment? You're not going to be able to get the glory, but it's going to be a woman. All because he was unwilling to go on his own. I think the thought with this is, at least the one I take away is, Barak still went and fought, right? He still had to fight the battle. But he lost out on his honor, his glory, God setting him up, because he couldn't go without somebody else backing him up. The image for us is, who do I need in order to win the spiritual battle in life? Who do I need? See some of you mouthing it. I need God. Now, do I need you guys to get to heaven? Would it be a good help to me? Is it something that would help us all get there easier? But the image is, if I'm fighting the fight with God on my side, then I'm going to win. Barak, even though like us, he was fearful, doubting, I don't know the exact emotion or thought there with him, but he refused to go without somebody else going with him. And he lost out on some kind of treasure in heaven, or some kind of honor later on. You go into chapter 5, and it's this song of Barak, and we won't go into all of it, but it's essentially just a retelling of everything that happens. But notice, if you would, you notice verse 1 there, it talks about how these two, Deborah and Barak, sang this song. But look down at verse 6. We'd already mentioned that with Shamgar and it being brought in. But it says Shamgar and Barak, right? Is that the names it says there in verse 6? In the days of Shamgar and who? It's not Barak, somebody said it. It's Jael, right? Here is Jael listed right alongside Shamgar, this judge who slew 600 Philistines. And then you skip down verse 12, Barak and Deborah are mentioned there. But the thought, at least in my mind, is this Jael took Barak's spot in this song. Now, I don't know if that's exactly the right way to phrase that, but the image is, God said to Barak through Deborah, "You're not going to get everything that you were going to get because you were hesitant, unwilling to go." But here is Jael, whose family had essentially kind of sided with the enemy. But what is she doing? She killed the enemy general, right? She is now in a song with all of these great judges and people of great renown and interest, right? Barak's still there, but his place is diminished because of Jael's actions in this. End of the chapter here. It says, verse 23, God subdued Jabin the king of Canaan before the people of Israel, and the hand of the people of Israel pressed harder and harder against Jabin, the king of Canaan, until they destroyed them. So the image is, they went out and fought them. They destroyed Sisera, his chariots, that I guess really strong part of the army. But after that, they just kept going after them. Barak, Deborah, that army that was there, the next, I guess, generations or whatever, the thought is they drove these people out. But chapter 6, verse 1 starts with what? The beginning of that cycle again, right? The people of Israel did evil in the sight of God. Very quickly, though, I want you to look at the end of chapter 5 before we jump completely into chapter 6. Verse number 28. For some reason, this one is very telling to me about about the Canaanite people, or at least about what everybody thought about them. Verse 28, it says, "Out of the window she peered, the mother of Sisera, wailed through the lattice and said, 'Why is the chariot so long in his coming? Why tarry the hoofbeats of his chariot?'" What is this mother longing for or pleading for at this moment? I want my boy to come home. Now, is that a thought all of us can kind of connect with or relate with? The one that's lost, or one that's gone for a period of time and maybe you don't know where they are. Again, parents, maybe that kid that's gone out for somewhere and you don't know where they're at and it's 10 minutes late and you're... All right, so here's the image of the mother. Now notice verse 29. "Her wisest princesses answered, 'Indeed, she answers herself.'" Verse 30. "They have not found and divided have they not found and divided the spoils, a womb or two for every man, spoil of dyed material for Sisera, spoiled of dyed materials, embroidered, pieces of dyed work embroidered, and with neck as a spoil." The song is saying what? Here's what the mother is weeping, or at least concerned for the lost kid, but what are those people around her telling her? Don't worry, they're just getting a bigger bag, all right? They're just stuffing that loading that camel up to bring it back. The second thought there, well, they've all found wives. I'm going to use that word loosely here. They've all found wives to bring back home with them, right? Don't worry, Mom. He's out destroying, pillaging, raping, killing. He'll be home soon. But, verse 31, "So may all the enemies of the Lord perish, but your friends be like the sun as he rises in his might." The song ends with just a funny thought there for me. It is, here's what we've accomplished through God, but here's what those enemies of God are sitting back home thinking. Well, we just got to wait for them to come in, right? They're just out sowing their wild oats, and they'll be back with the spoils at some time. But the person of God knows what? "So may all of your enemies perish, O Lord." Can anybody stand against God's might? All right. But what happens to the friends of God? Yes, sir. Really?
Yes, he was considered probably the most intelligent or wise king around there. And then Sisera, that's an Egyptian name that means servant of rock. So Jabin had went out and recruited probably the best commander in the world at all. So this story tells you can take the best the world's got, but when you try to derail God's plan, even the best the world has.
You see, I didn't know that aspect of this. Every way you look at this, it just builds up God more in it. You end with God's enemies fail, but his friends prosper or rise up. John 14:15 or 15:14, whichever the one is, "You're my friends indeed if you do whatsoever I've commanded you." All right, do y'all want to rise up? Do y'all want God to be on your side? Do we want to be encouraged? And all right, so what do? I got to be the friend of God, right? And that means following that general command that God said, as you live your life, as you bring up your children, as the next generation, you keep me as your focus. You keep my covenant with them and all of that stuff, all that that's entailed with that. But the same, I guess, general thought is true for us today. Now, the actions, the physical things that we do in order to serve God have changed. But it's still this thought of, who are you going to serve, right? Is it going to be the God of your fathers or the God of the lands in which you dwell? Is it going to be that God, or is it going to be, money or things or material goods? The book of Judges for us is this constant cycle of people mess up, people fall back into sin. God punishes, but God is always there to save and bring back the person that's wanting to be in a right relationship with Him. Now, like I said, we're going to look at chapter 6 next week. This has to deal with Gideon. I think it's through chapter 10 where his section is. But Gideon, all of these judges have a neat thing to deal with them. But I want y'all to read and notice where Gideon is when this angel of the Lord appears to him, because that's just the best setup in my mind. All right? So where is Gideon when this is asked, and then what's asked of him? Any thoughts or comments before we close tonight? All right, I appreciate y'all's time and attention then.